Right now we're joined by Mr. James Swagger of Capricorn Radio. How you doing, my friend? Welcome to Inside the Jackal.
Well, thank you, and thanks for introducing Capricorn Radio. You're the first one to ever do that. I'm usually introduced as the author, but...
You are the author as well. Tell us a little bit about your books. I want to introduce you as the host because people are going to be hearing your voice here on PSN Radio on a weekly basis. You've already done a couple of shows on the network, and I'm pretty sure people are going to be like, wait a second, we hear this guy on PSN, Jackal. What are you trying to sell here? So tell us about the book, man. Tell us about your work as an author.
Sure, yeah. I just on the Capricorn Radio, I've just recently joined PSN, thanks to yourself, Jackal, and I'm really grateful for that. It's great to be part of the network. So I've just done 2 shows, but it's a weekly thing, twice a week, I should say, and great to be aboard. But I'm more well known as an author, as you quite rightly say, and I kind of got into podcasting because I knew some other authors, and I just said, well, I might as well start talking to these guys and do a show about it. And I started the core body of the show with the books and the authors that I was researching and that I was friends with. And I mean, most of what my background is, I'm an author researcher of megalithic sites, ancient history, and anywhere in between. I like anything from the Romans and beyond, really, because that's the stuff that there's no trouble with, because everything from after the Romans, people get politically motivated about, and there's like religious and all sorts of connotations with it. But, some from the Romans and beyond is what I like. And mostly the history of engineering, the history of science, the history of all the weird and wonderful stuff, the anomalies, the mysteries that we tried to solve. And of course, the megalithic empires of Western Europe, everybody knows Stonehenge, but equally we have Newgrange in Ireland, which is what I wrote the book about, and other places. But basically, the megalithic civilization of Western Europe is where I kind of carved my niche, Jackal. Now, I should say, I never envisaged myself being an author in any real sense. I wanted to when I was in my early 20s, and I got a little bit of a break doing some articles for Historical Mysteries magazine, and that was great, and that whet the appetite, and that really kind of, I sunk my teeth in, and I had a bit of fun doing it. But it was a short-lived process, and then when it stopped, I was kind of a bit dismayed, and I thought then maybe I would compile these articles that I wrote into a little Encyclopedia of Mysteries book, and that's still half finished, that book. But the thing is, when I got to write the chapter on the megalithic civilization, I got halfway through. I got drawn into this mystery of the megaliths again, because the first time I got drawn in when I was younger, and the thing is, I never ever thought we could figure anything out about these megalithic civilization. Yeah, there was a lot of theories, there was a lot of guesswork, there was a lot of hypotheses, and we were always told in school, nothing to see here, go home, it's just some stones. These guys lifted some big stones, that's it. We can't know anything else. There's no point in researching it in any detail. You'd be foolish for doing it, basically. And that's really what we were taught, growing up, Jackal. Now, the thing is...
More here in America, believe it or not, than where you grew up.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I think it's a universal thing, and I think it's because archaeology has a stranglehold. Now, I don't mean to speak disparagingly of archaeologists. I do now and again, but only certain archaeologists. I mean, I don't need to brand everybody with the same ideology, because I think there is some very good archaeologists out there, and there's some, but a lot of them aren't open-minded. They only have the blinkers on for archaeology. But archaeology is the growing science now. It's a multidiscipline science now, because it's now having to absorb other fields, whether it likes it or not. And people aren't waiting around, because you have archaeoastronomy and archaeoacoustics. And that's what I get into in both my first 2 books, the Newgrange Serious Mystery and the Megalith Acoustics Mystery. Because I realized there was 2 scientific tools that I could use. That was the science of astronomy and the science of acoustics to peer into these ancient monuments. There's a very, very good reason, Jackal. 1500 BC, everything before 1500 BC, I think there's 90% of the monuments before 1500 BC have an astronomical alignment.
Right. That's what I was going to ask about the serious mystery, if it's all connected astrologically. Is that where you're taking off from?
Sure, Jackal, sure. I mean, the astronomy is basically, the key thing here. There's a reason we can apply astronomy to these ancient monuments, because these guys were obsessed with astronomy. You would be led to believe by archaeology that these things are just passage graves. There's some burial. There's a burial function there. Go home. They just built a nice fancy tomb for their dead, and it's just not that case. these things are astronomical observatories. Now, when we're talking about passage tombs in Ireland, Newgrange being one of the most famous ones. Equally, you have Gavrinis, another famous one in Brittany and France. You got Maze Hill, another famous one in Scotland. And these all take in solstices and beams of sunlight into the inner chambers and have this astronomical feat of a display of engineering and wonder, like, and so they're fascinating monuments, and just even in terms of our modern day perspective, just going into witness the phenomena, but it's much more than that. And that's what we're going to get into. But I mean, I should say, like, my career and background is engineering, basically, mostly engineering, heavy industrial engineering, I should say. And I worked most of my life as a systems analyst. And the key thing is, like, I worked on some pretty big jobs, but they were very, very complex and very, very industrial, sophisticated. And my job was to basically look for problems, look for anomalies, look for where the link in the chain was going to break, try and weed that link in the chain out before it happened. So I would study and I would do electromechanical systems, computerized systems, power stations, right down to wind farms, water treatments, all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. And I did, and I loved that job, and I got what I wanted out of it, and I wanted to make a career break, and I did a physics with astronomy degree, and this is all pertinent. The reason I'm telling you this is all pertinent. And I qualified myself, and I did a lot of the big jobs, and I kind of burnt myself out. I mean, I worked a long hours. I worked for half my early 20s away, but I traveled around all the megalithic regions, Jackal. And the key thing is, I found myself one day, looking at these megalithic monuments with my systems analyst approach, basically. I had looked at them all through my early 20s, but I'd learned a skill set being away from Ireland for 12 years, and I'd seen other megalithic regions, and I was very, very privileged. So when I took my systems analyst approach, I found myself unveiling stuff, Jackal, and this is the key thing about my book. This is why it's different,
Well, let me ask you, have you done any research behind, like, for example, here in Florida, we have the Coral Castle, which have no idea, nobody knows how it was built, or, we know who did it, but it's a big mystery on how it was done. And that wasn't that long ago. Have you done any research at all on the Coral Castle?
I actually have, yeah. I know an author called Chris Dunn. I don't know if you know Chris Dunn, but I've had Chris Dunn on the show a couple of times, and he's done a couple of books on ancient Egypt. And he's mad to do a book on Coral Castle, and I've been collaborating with him, not for any purpose of writing a book. I'm just, from the 2-3 times I've had him on the show, I've been discussing Coral Castle with him, and I think it's a fascinating place, and I think it holds the key to some ancient technology, and I really do believe Lee Scanlon, the guy who built Coral Castle, had the answer. I really do believe.
Yes.
I mean, the guy was like, what was he? I don't know what you guys use pounds instead of stone. We use stone for weight or kilos, but
right.
He was a little guy. He was a
Yes.
tough little guy. He couldn't have even lifted them stones with leverage or nothing. He had them balanced, and he had stones perfectly balanced off center, so that they could.
Right.
A doorway, and then he moved them all as well. There's the story of how he moved them and relocated them, and there's a wonderful book called Waiting for Agnes, and if you ever want to research Coral Castle, use that book, because it gives you a bit behind the guy. He built this Coral Castle for a woman called Agnes who never came.
Right.
It was a love story as well as a megalithic scientific mystery wonder. It's got everything in it.
James, it's crazy. That's one of those stories that always makes me realize that human beings can be very, very creative in doing whatever there is. And this guy discovered something that goes, I think, all the way back to when the pyramids were created. Because I'm not sold on aliens coming down and building the pyramids for us. No, I think we created pyramids. Mankind, I think, did it. But there is some technology there that they used that has escaped us.
Sure. And the thing is, he always professed to have known how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids.
Right.
And he just threw that out there, but I do wonder why he never let it out, why he kept the knowledge to himself. Maybe he just didn't expect to die. He did die relatively young, so maybe he was going to pass it on one day, but I think he talk about this little black box that he had, Jackal, where, he was transmitting frequency, and I think he had some Tesla technology on the go. I think if you really want to get into the science of what it was, I think he had non-linear fractal resonance. That's the actual. It's above most people's head, even sophisticated mathematicians and physicists. That's basically the key. There's a reason for why I say that. But I mean, I looked at the acoustics, and the ancient Egyptians were using acoustics and frequencies. You can have acoustic levitation in the laboratory now. I think there's I mean, I looked into this for the acoustics mystery, and I do think the ancient Egyptians had a way for lifting or maneuvering stones of certain content. It wasn't every stone. I think they were able to maneuver certain stones that had a crystallized content, because the crystallized content in the stone was the reason they chose stone. There was pink granites, there was certain diorites and all. They worked stones with certain qualities, with certain crystals, and they would react to nonlinear fractal resonance. But again, the coral stones that he used were of a certain density and certain type as well. They talk about him having this little black box on a tripod. He could have been levitating the stones for all we know, Jackal. And I'm
most likely, yeah.
And what I'm saying is, I'm more open to that than aliens coming down and just giving man the helping hand kind, and that makes it all easy again, But
yeah.
But I'm open to ETs. I'm not shutting my eyes to that either. But I just think that Leeds Scanlon had some sort of a technology figured out, Jackal.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think that he just tapped into something that most of us is just above our heads. But it's like everything. Look, that was what his brain gave him to do. Everybody is here for a reason, and was his reason to be here, to create that coral castle and do something that leaves that lasting memory. But he really, to tap into that kind of technology, he got it from somewhere. I mean, he just didn't find it out and pull it out of the ether. I'm sure there's ways to go back and research some of the stuff that he researched and maybe find out exactly if it was acoustic levitation, which that makes a lot of sense. I've seen some of the research you're talking about on acoustic levitation in labs, and it does work. I mean, there's scientific proof that there is a way to do it. So,
well, I think it might be also reverse magnetism, because that's what he alludes to. So I'm open to a mix of the two. Or there's something strange that we obviously don't. There's some form of leverage or momentum that he was using to get those stones into place. And whether there was I don't understand the mechanism for reverse magnetism. I don't know what that could be. I don't know if you could just emit a frequency. But there was all strange devices in his workshop. It was technology that he had to do it. But yeah, what a weird, fascinating story. And on your own homeland, guys, in America is. I've never seen America being so full of mystery at the moment. You see America History on Earth. I had Scott Walter on, and there's so many mysteries up, especially on your side of the East Coast, America. You guys are riddled with it there, from Miami, Coral Castle, right up to Maine and up the top.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no. Ancient America is a lot stranger than they led us to believe it or not. There's definitely a history in this country that we everyday Americans are not even aware of. I'm positive about that. It goes way beyond Native Americans. I think even way before that. I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of years before America was even here. There's a rich history in this land. It's slowly, and I think over time, James, do you think we're eventually? There's a lot of talk about disclosure in the UFO community, but do you think there'll be a disclosure on the exact history and the knowledge that we have of the history in this country here in America?
Wow, that's a beautiful insight right there, Jackal. I think we should do, because somebody asked me a question the other day, Jackal, and I was talking about the giants going missing from the mounds in East Coast America, in Ohio Valley and that, and the famous Smithsonian Institute, it keeps losing so many valuable artifacts. I would have that institution dismantled just on negligence alone if that was me. But It's not negligence. The stuff's getting disappeared because it doesn't fit with the paradigm. I don't think they wanted to fit with the paradigm. And then I had somebody ask me a very valid question: why would they do that? Is this a conspiracy? And I went, it's much more than that. I think we need a disclosure on it, because I think they would. I think the powers that be would do that more so, Jackal, than they would UFOs. Because if they can harbour the true facts of ancient history, then you don't know who you are. You don't know where you're going. You don't know where, and that's more important than anything.
James, what's that saying? If you don't learn from the past, you're condemned to repeat it. And if there was a civilization that we could figure out what happened to them if they lived thousands of years ago and they blew themselves away or something. There's a reason to go back and do some of this work. Like, for example, Jamie just brings up here in Skype chat the Miami Circle, which, again, here in Miami, the Miami Circle, that's a discovery that happened not long ago also. That's an incredible discovery in itself, and that tells you that there definitely is something to the ancient past here in our own land in America.
Many don't even know about the Miami Circle, and there's a lot of strange things. I think I showed you that I found here in Florida just on Google Earth looking over the state. Strange structures in the middle of nowhere, like 40 miles away in the middle of nowhere, but they're symmetrical, look like something. So,
wow. I'm doing a tour next March in the Ohio Valley of the burial mound, Serpent Mound and all that, and I'm definitely going to be doing a personal trip from Miami straight up to Maine, as many of the stuff on the East Coast as I can. Because it's like, I'm not going to get a chance to be over there, and when I am, I'm like, I'm going to make the most of it. But Miami Circle, somebody had sent me a link for that as well, and I'd looked into that, and I really do believe at this stage now that I have an offer to go to Dennis Stone on the American Stonehenge that was on America on Earth. I'm going to get him on the show not too distant future.
Cool. And
there's the American Newgrange, as they call it, as well, up in Maine, up that way. And, all these chambers, and one of them goes to 2000 BC, and there's mounds going to like 3000 BC. And I really do think, from my research, and when I looked at Newgrange Serious Mystery, I thought, naively, I would just apply some astronomy and figure out these monuments. And, of course, the biggest question was, anybody's going to want to know, who was these builders like? Who was these megalithic guys? And the answer is much more mysterious and beautiful than I would ever have thought. And I really do feel now at this stage that there was an ancient seafaring nation, a race of people, if you want to call it that, circumnavigating the globe. And I think, Ireland and America were two hotspots. I think they were in the Atlantic somewhere. I mean, I allude to this at the end of the book, who were the builders like, but I do think that there was a sunken landmass there. I don't think this was the only sunken landmass. I don't think it's the only one location. But
they found several. They found in Japan, they found sunken cities.
Yonaguni, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they found several. Even in Cuba, my land, by the way, out the shores of Cuba, they've gone pretty deep, and there's stuff down there, pyramids and all kinds of things down there, which that tells you that this world that we're living in has probably gone through several cycles of life forms living on the surface that had somehow ended up buried deep within the earth. Which makes perfect sense that the continents are constantly moving, that, land does form and transform and change over time, especially if a planet's been here for 4 billion years that it's been here. There might be a lot of transformation in a billion years. What do you say, James?
Oh, for sure. Oh, just on the Atlantic, I did a show on the Azores pyramid there. Have you seen the pyramid that was on Earth?
Yeah, no, there's been a few pyramids on Earth. That's not the only one.
Yeah, it's not the only one, but there was one recently that looks very much like a step pyramid. It looks like the pyramid of Kukulkan.
The Balkan pyramid? No.
No, I mean, sorry, Jamie. No, there's this pyramid found off the coast of the Azores by a guy doing.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, he was doing sonar testing, and he has a sonar image of it. But it basically is the base of a pyramid with the steps going up to a flat platform, much like you would look at the Kukulkan pyramid in the Yucatan Peninsula, El Castillo it's called. And, it just looks exactly like that from the air, only the only difference is it's underneath the water. Now, the Azores Plateau is basically a raised, elevated plateau, and that was above water in or not too distant past. Here we have again another pyramid in the Atlantic. There was one off in Bermuda as well. But the key thing about the one off the Azores Islands is that it's got a square base of 8 square kilometers. It's a monster. It's an absolute monster. I'm a proponent for this sunken landmass, and I allude to the end of my book, The Newgrange Serious Mystery. I wanted to narrow down, and I don't like to go into mythology too much, not when I was writing the astronomy book. I have done a bit more on the second book, my Megalith Acoustics book, but, I mean, geologically, you have a sandbank, you have a sandbank off the coast of Ireland called Porcupine Bank. It's on the Rockwall Trench. It's another raised elevation plateau. It runs around the west coast of Ireland from Galway to down to the bottom of Cork. But in around Porcupine Bank, it's a raised bank on this trench, and it's called Porcupine Bank because it looks like a porcupine's back, basically. It's not a very illustrious name, but here's the thing. There's ancient maps showing this mythical island called High Brazil, Hy space Brasil, High Brazil. And High Brazil was known as the other Atlantis, basically. You know, it's the other Atlantis is this nickname. And High Brazil has been on ancient maps, several ancient maps, going back to Middle Ages, back into antiquity.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And not only that, it's actually shown as two islands split in two. And it's an island, two islands the size of Greater London, like maybe 20 miles in diameter. Now, the thing is, it's located exactly in the same location as the Porcupine Bank sandbank, which like basically means that High Brazil was there when sea levels were lower. But not only that, the ancient Celts, they inherited the megalithic monuments of Ireland. There was a crossover of about 500 years because the megalithic builders were in existence from 5000 BC to 1000 BC is when they died out and disappeared. But then the Celts came in about 1500 BC. So, and that's really when they started to appear. I mean, they didn't really come into existence properly till about 1000 BC. So they were just at the tail end of the megalithic builders. So a lot of what we know, or anything of the ancient sites, the megalithic sites of Ireland, I mean, there's a lot of mythology from Celts, like, and they talk about the builders called the Tuatha de Danann. That's who they attribute these builders of the megalithic monuments as the Tuatha de Danann, which is Gaelic basically for other race of people, or the people of people. Sometimes we're translated as the people of the goddess of Danu, another the tribe of Danu, or the people belonging to Danu.
The tribe of Dan.
Yeah. Now the thing is, I mean, they were literally denominated as another race. They were another people, another race.
Right.
And they were an occupying force, the Tuatha de Danann. And they came from the Western Seas. That's where they said they came from. They said they came from this mythical land that appeared from the sea and disappeared into the mist. Now, you have to understand, Scotland, Ireland, we have this strange mist in the sea, and it's picturesque, it's beautiful, it's tranquil, it's dreamy, romantic, you know. But if you can picture an island just off the coast in the mist, it would basically appear and disappear, like, you know. It would just appear and disappear. And this is where the old Celtic tales. But, I mean, you know, in the Western Seas, we don't have that anymore because Porcupine Bank's underneath the water. And I really do believe, like, that's our best candidate. You know, it's the beauty is that it's not just there. I mean, we have this, the Azores Plateau. There's other structures there underneath the water. And I think, you know, rising sea levels push these guys off the islands and the other sunken monuments. And they had to just start up again. I mean, they scrambled for land, and the two most natural landing bays when you hit Western Europe, if you're coming from a sunken landmass in the Atlantic, you have to reverse engineer this, guys, and look backwards. Like, I mean, the first two most natural landing bays you're gonna hit is Sligo Bay and the Gulf of Morabhan and Brittany, and that's the two biggest concentrations of megalithic monuments. You know, Sligo Bay has got 5,000 archaeological sites in around Sligo City and beyond. And same as with the Gulf of Morabhan, all the stone rows of alignments, the big giant megaliths like of Brittany are all in around the one region, pretty much, like, you know. And it looks like they hit this western coast of Europe, and they just set up camp again. They try to, and it looks as well, there's two waves as well, because you see two waves of monuments. There's monuments dated in Ireland to 5000 BC, and the other ones in between 3500 and 3000 BC. So there's a 1500 year gap there, Jackal and Jamie. I mean, this 1500 year gap's not explained. There's clearly two waves of building, same style, same structure, not so much art in the 5000 BC, but in the 3200 BC we see art appearing as well. But I mean, there's an ancient megalithic cemetery in Sligo called Carrowmore. I don't go into that in the book, but there's a reason for that, because there's no art. It's pretty much decimated, but I mean, it's a 5000 BC monument, you know, megalithic complex. There's maybe 100 tombs or so there, all various states of decay. Well, equally in Brittany, we have a 4800 year BC date on some of these monuments. Now that's deep antiquity now. That's
Yeah.
you know. But then we also have this popular date of 3000 BC for the most of the monuments, but there is an early date there, and that's the key thing. And they're both popping up in these two natural landing bays, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out, that these guys all hugged the coastline. These guys were seafarers. You have to understand that. I mean, they only stuck to Western Europe, basically, or Southern Europe, but all along the coastline. It was all coastal stuff to them. These guys came by boat. We know they came by boat because they basically have monuments in Scotland and monuments in Ireland and monuments in Western Europe. And it's the same style, the same art, the same solstices, the same internal features, the same, logistics. It's like the same people.
Same designers.
Same designers, yeah. The same people did all this. So we know it was the same common hand of influence. The question is, did they have rudimentary contact to and from each other, or did they all come from the common source and then hit the lands and have no contact? Either way, they did it by boat. But I like to think that they came from a common source and that these guys were, refugees. Like, they were fleeing, they were refugees because of the rising sea levels. The refugee by boat theory, I call it. But
that makes sense, and that also, I think, will attribute to all the history of having a great flood on this planet, which would just really be the rising sea level and some society losing their land.
Oh yeah, the rising sea levels and the flood. I mean, the flood myths are all around the world. They're all around the world, and it doesn't get explained why they're in so many places. And I think you look at like anomalies like the Olmec heads in Central America, by the way, and you've got these strange like negroid features that aren't attributed. They're like a black civilization that did this, and I think we have this lost tribe like that went around Western Europe, South America, and I think they all came from sunken places in the Atlantic. Like, I think if you think the center of the Atlantic, if you went in all directions, you pretty much would get into the Mediterranean basin. You would get to Western Europe. You would get to America, North America. You would get to South America, and you would go around to maybe even to Australia as well. But I think seafaring was the key, and I think there was a lost black African race type of people. Like, they talk about this black tribe also, and the Hyperboreans were a black tribe, and that they took this hallucinogenic drink. And that they maybe had a temple in the north. The Hyperboreans had this temple in the north, which I attribute to Callanish Stone Temple for three specific reasons. There's three pieces of evidence we have that the island that Callanish stands on, the Hebridean island of Lewis, is basically the same size as Sicily, and they say that the island was the same size as Sicily, and they also say that it was a lunar alignment every 19 years to the monument, and that the monument had a setting of the Pleiades due east on a solstice. Now, the thing is, those three pieces of evidence can only fit that one island, and it can only fit that monument at that latitude. There is nothing else at that latitude. There is no other monument or temple at that latitude that fits that criteria. So thereby elimination, the process of elimination alone, elementary, my dear Watson, like type thing. It's like, it can only be that temple. So right there in that key piece of evidence, by doing some research, you can say that the Hyperboreans had a temple in the north that it was most likely, with acceptance, it was Callanish Stone Temple, but they were known to be a black race as well. I also attribute the Dogon tribe in my book and links with the Dogon culture, who are still surviving today. And one of the great pieces of research and evidence by Marcel Griol and Germaine Dieterlen, if it wasn't for these guys living with the tribe for a long period of time. Great book, Conversations with Oko Tameli, is a wonderful book for anybody researching the Dogon. If you can get a copy of it, it's pretty hard to get your hands on. But I uncovered some links with Dogon beliefs and Dogon ideology and symbology, and I just basically go into that a little bit in the New Grain Serious Mystery, but it's there and it's not going away. I mean, you have the same glyphs used in the megalithic art. Now, I will distinguish, it's not Celtic art. People always think this is Celtic. They mix up the Celts and the megalithic builders. They're like they're the same people. I will make that distinction. And that's okay. I understand. That's not to put people down. There's a reason for that. They call it Celtic jewellery. You know, when you come to Ireland and people just go, oh, Celtic jewellery, and they see all the spirals and all. It's not Celtic, it's megalithic art that they call Celtic jewellery. Like, you know, they market it. And like, even ourselves, we do this, like, you know. So it's confusing, but it's megalithic art. And the megalithic art, you have like a triple water wave glyph, which is synonymous with the Dogon and synonymous with the ancient Egypt. You have the spiral, which is synonymous with the megalithic empire. Not just Ireland, but typically Newgrange, the entrance stone, and it's typical with many ancient cultures around the world, even America. Like, you also have concentric circles. You have like what looks like a leaf with the veins of the leaf. You have the sun wheel as well, which I want to get into today and tie it in with the Halloween element. But this sun wheel is basically an 8-segmented wheel. It's a circle with 8 segments on it. Basically, you put like eight pieces of a pie. You know, it's like that's what the solar wheel looks like: north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. Right. You know, and at our latitude, that's where our sun sets. Like, the sun sets in summertime, summer solstice, northeast and northwest, and pretty much. And in the in the winter time, it rises in the southeast and sets in the southwest. Of course, spring and autumn equinox rises in the east and sets in the west. So that's the 8 points of the year. But they had this, what we call a solar wheel. I call them Dogon sun wheels in the book. But the Dogon have this symbol as well. And it's not just in Ireland, this sun wheel. This sun wheel is going back to 3,500 BC, at least, that we know of, at least. You know,
a question about the Dogon. You did say they were believed to be of Egyptian descent. Now, were they fleeing because of religious persecution at one point? That's and the astronomical lore goes back, I know, at least 3,500 years, you said. But were they being prosecuted at one point for their astronomical lore?
No, actually, it was a bit more romantic than that. I think the Dogon tribe, they are persecuted nowadays. But no, when they left Egypt, they believed that they left Egypt to send a backup copy of their civilization out into the remote as a nomadic tribe, because they knew there was a black race of pharaohs that ruled Egypt, by the way. Okay, and Dogon obviously a black race of people, and if you look at the works of Laird Scranton, you would pretty much have to accept that the Dogon are, at least, you don't have to agree with the concepts and ideology in the book, but you will have to accept that the Dogon marched out of ancient Egypt. Now, when they left Egypt, they went up to the north, around to the west coast of north and west coast of Africa by migrating the top of the coastline of the top of Africa, eventually coming and residing in western Mali where they are today. Now, that's a long migratory route. But the key thing is that, you know, they're linked with, like, they've got weird Judeo-Christian rites, and, you know, they're like, you know, they circumcise, and they've got like strange links with ancient Egypt. I mean, they use the same ideology and symbology that I was just talking about, this sun wheel, but it's used to represent the same key thing. Jackal and Jamie, this is the key thing. It's the heliacal rising of a star or a constellation. Basically, is an astronomical concept where basically the star. I will get back to the question, but the star rising on the horizon on a certain day. Pick the star Sirius, for example. This was one of the biggest ones that the ancient Egyptians used. Now, they have a star rising on an equinox, and then the sun comes up right behind it and drowns it out very, very quickly. Now, that's called a heliacal rising, Helios being the sun and the rising of the star. So the sun rises, just drowns out that star that just came up as well. So that's a heliacal rising. Now, when a heliacal rising happened on a certain day of the year, that was like the rain dance time. That was like the biggest thing ever. Like, you know, these guys went ballistic for this. Like, you know, they loved it. But the key thing is that these heliacal rises is what uniquely identifies the Dogon and the Egyptians and the megalithic builders as well, because when you look at the astronomy of the megalithic builders, they were obsessed with heliacal risings as well. And I show that in my book, and I show the cosmology of the megalithic builders is no different to the Dogon. Now, I'm not saying the Dogon, their ancestors built Newgrange. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's definitely a common hand of influence there, where the same teachers at hand, you know, that the Tuatha de Danann, maybe they came in and taught the people. But the key thing is, the Dogon, you have to accept that they marched out of ancient Egypt. They're already located in the region due to the Judeo-Christian beliefs that they have, and the circumcision and the genetic rights they have for breeding. And it's an incredibly complex civilization. But what they did was, they were in a panic, and they had to leave ancient Egypt because they knew Egypt would eventually fall at one point. They envisaged their own civilization falling. So they took the same core concepts, and they had an oral culture for the Dogon, and they had a written culture for ancient Egypt. Now, the written culture was a hieroglyphic system using symbolic thought and ideology and symbology through hieroglyph system. And eventually it still is a written system, although it's more appealing to the right brain, to to the simultaneous thought as opposed to the linear logic of the left brain. I mean, there was a reason that lasted so long. I mean, written culture is just, we lose context. Like, I mean, you lose vision, you lose context by writing things down in words. Like, and that's why these guys lasted so long. They were conscious beings, but eventually their consciousness fell. Their evolved consciousness, their spirituality, they fell from grace basically, and Dogon knew that, and that's why they sent the backup copy. Because the oral history, you have to understand the oral history of the Dogon. They tell this in their oral history, by the way, that they were going to fall from grace, and they are there to preserve their own culture. That's why they live like nomads. There's a reason they just live growing onions and collecting pigeon dung. They don't want to be corrupted by an outside civilization. They believe it is their sole right to preserve this knowledge for humanity. That, like, this is the... And I'm absolutely stunned that this civilization can go back this far and still survive today. They say the ancient Chinese are the only ones to be in existence since 3000 BC, like, and that's true in a way, but they're constantly evolving. But
Right.
they're constantly evolving. But Dogon have protected themselves from outside influence, but they've also protected their oral history. But the key thing is, Jamie, just to wrap up, this is why they marched out of ancient Egypt, and this is why it wasn't from persecution. It was to protect the knowledge that they had, because these black pharaohs were being oppressed and taken over by other tribes in Egypt, and eventually the black pharaohs disappeared.
Right.
And this isn't a race thing, by the way. The black pharaohs weren't like warmongers. They just absorbed by another culture.
Well, there's even talk that Cleopatra was black.
Yeah, I mean,
so
and there's multitude of colors there, by the way.
Yes, Cleopatra did not look like Elizabeth Taylor. Everybody, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Oh, I know, and I mean, there's a multitude of races and colors there, if you want to call it that. Now, the thing is, the Dogon, when they set up the backup copy, the oral history, you have to understand that the oral history is not just me telling my descendant or my son, or I call my son, you're going to be the storyteller and you're going to tell the next descendant. Everybody else in the family, you can be a farmer, you can be an astronomer, you can be whatever, but you're the storyteller and you carry the story. It's not just telling a story and then he tells it to somebody else, because that story can get corrupted. That story can be a story and can get changed. Oral history basically is a story that cannot be changed over time. And
Right.
the oral history, they criticize oral history, but the people don't really understand it. They haven't studied it in detail. They're guessing what they think oral history is, and they say it's fluid. The critics of it say that it's too fluid and it can change over time, and it's not true, because there's so many checkpoints in the story that they tell that the story will not make sense at the end if you corrupt the story. If you change any details in the story over time, it will not make sense at the end. So it's like you have these checkpoints reenacting the story all through the story, and it's only when you get into the depth. It's a very complex oral history. It's so complex and so detailed.
You gotta admit that when it's an oral history, there is a chance for corruption from the people telling the story themselves. They could kind of tell it how they would want. They could always influence it and pass it down to the generation as whatever the story is.
Sure, I think what you mean is there could be a will of the person to change the story.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
I identify with that totally.
It's just like in the Bible, for example. I mean, we've had the Bible retranslated how many times now, and every time it's retranslated, things change. Because somebody is translating it in their way, and they're giving it the way they want to write it. And of course, the Bible is written by man, but that's neither here nor there. But an oral story is the same. I would think it's the same thing. I mean, it's being handed down from generation to generation.
Let me just identify the difference between the Dogon oral history and other oral history. The Dogon oral history is sophisticated. It's the most sophisticated oral history there is, and it's got so many checkpoints in the story, Jackal, that it's extremely difficult to do that. Even if you wanted to do that, you would have to redesign the whole story to make one piece of evidence change. Basically, that's why the story's set up. Yeah, it's not like you think. Now, there is other oral histories out there where it's basically just somebody telling a story. I need to identify the difference with the Dogon history. It's incredibly complex and incredibly hard to get into. I mean, I study complexity for a living, and I found it difficult to understand. and they are basically a system. Their oral history is a system of knowledge and evidence, and it can all be corroborated as well. So for all the criticisms of the Dogon, it's very hard to criticize it unless you know what their oral history is and you've read their oral history, But there is several books on it, and you've got to understand that Germain Dieterlen and Marcel Griot, these guys lived with them for 14, 15 years,
Wow.
and wrote several works. These guys, by the way, these were titans in their day. These were just nobodies in anthropology. These were some of the best anthropologists on the planet of the day, like in the 1930s. These guys were like titans, not to be a force not to be reckoned with. These guys were and even they didn't understand. This is the beauty. Even they didn't understand what they were being told, so they documented it. They did what they did as scientists and anthropologists. They just documented it really well. And they went, "What does this mean?" And Ogo Temeli, the Dogon elder, basically said, "Don't mind what it means yet, just document it. If you're here to document," and that's what they did. It's probably good that they didn't understand it, because
they couldn't influence it themselves. Yeah, there's no way to self-influence it.
They could have been the one changed the story, exactly.
Right.
So what they did was they documented the whole thing, and it's only when you go into it and you can see the oral history plays out and reenacts itself, and it's not fluid like people make it out to be. That's a criticism that's not founded in anything like that.
Now, the current Dogon population is between about 400,000, 800,000 around there recently, or currently?
I don't even know where they get those figures from. Yeah, I mean, they say it could be as low as 200,000, but yeah, it's less than 1 million anyway. It's less than 1 million, Jackal. But I mean, yeah, there's where do they get these numbers from? I don't know, but I mean, they have groups of families, Jackal. And they have groups of family, and they know which family can breed which family. They have an incredibly complex breeding program for each group of families. And basically, if you look at your hands, Jackal.
Okay, I'm looking.
Yeah, look at your little finger. You see the way there's 2 lines on your little finger, separating your finger into 3 segments.
I see that.
Okay, well, you have that on every finger, yeah?
Correct.
Okay, so picture each one of those segments as a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And basically, they divide their hand up into complex numerology. And they say this pattern, this part of this finger mates with this family. So they attribute a family or a group name of a family. There's 64 patterns in your hand there. And it's the same as they have in ancient China as well, by the way. There's links between this numerology genetic breeding pattern. Everything these guys do are complex other than how they live, Jackal. This is like, you can understand why this is like a beacon for me for research. But I mean, I never envisaged that I would find a Dogon link to this, to the Newgrange thing. But the link is there. That's the key thing, Jackal. I mean, the link is there. They're incredibly complex. Everything they do is their astronomy is complex. Their philosophy is complex. Their breeding program is complex, and their history is complex. It's like, they don't live like complex people. They don't care for
iPads, cell phones, smartphones, computers.
The material civilization doesn't bother them.
Right.
They're keepers of knowledge. These are wisdom keepers,
Almost like Buddhist monks, but a little bit more anti-technology than anything else. But they're very monk-like, right? Almost like Buddhist monks.
Exactly. And the thing is, this Dogon sun wheel, it's a no-brainer for me, especially when you see this sun wheel. It's used in ancient Egypt, and it's used in the Dogon, it's used in megalithic Ireland, all to represent the same thing. Imagine me drawing a glyph for you, and it's a glyph of a car with like a little logo on the side, J for Jackal or something like that, yeah? It's a unique glyph. It's a car with J on the side of it. Now, if I said that showed that all around the world, and then somebody else was using a glyph with a J on the car, they'd go, okay, that's a coincidence. But if I turned around and you meet somebody and they say, well, I'm using the J for Jackal and it's a car and a glyph, well, then you're using it for the same reason. That's the key thing, Jackal, yeah? It's like these guys are using the same glyphs for the same specific astronomical concepts.
I will say, though, James, I want to thank you for all the extra homework you've given me now, because Man, this is just an incredible show so far.
No, no worries. The funny thing is, you just made me think. I do talk to a lot of people on other radio shows, and even people that know me personally, and I'm always educating people about history. I'm a history buff, and the thing is, I go through a lot of information to give you the good stuff. So,
no kidding.
Jackal. I wish I could go through and just read one book with it all in it, and have all the juicy facts. But a lot of stuff there I don't agree with, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's got mistakes and erroneous, and it's opinionated, and it's maybe right, maybe wrong, who knows, but I go through a lot of information, and when I do throw out those interesting facts, they're all there from books I read, and it's like I have an insatiable desire for ancient history. That's what I just want to say. But it's very hard to talk history to people, Jackal, and the thing is, everybody sees history as boring, and I never did. I just seen it as laborious getting through the historical jargon there to get to the good stuff, because that's.
I love historicals. I love reading about ancient history, from the Roman Empire to Egyptian times. Anything historical, it fascinates me because it's our past.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of the stuff I concentrate on, Jackal, is the history of engineering or the history of the science, and mostly ancient technology, ancient artifacts, ancient science, because it gives me something to work on while I'm looking for the mysteries, if you want. Yeah, and there's a lot of mysteries of ancient technology and stuff like that, and but I do think that the megalithic builders of Ireland, Britain, and Western Europe. I concentrated on Ireland for a very good reason, because there's a lot of art here, Jackal. We have 45% of the rock art of the whole of Europe is sitting in 1 mile radius, in Ireland. It's astounding just that it's all in the one locale. Nearly half of it is in the one locale, basically, Jackal, and the thing is, I there's a lot of art. It means there's a lot of interpretation, there's a lot of explanation, there's a lot of something to go on, basically. So that's why I concentrate a lot on Ireland in the book. But I've been to 400 places, megalithic chambers, basically. Not just, there's other monuments I've been to as well, but megalithic chambers I've been to 400 plus across the whole of Western Europe,
Here's a question I wanted to get to before we went to break. What do you think a lot of these, structures, like the pyramids, like I mentioned earlier, what do you think there is such a connection astrologically to them? What do you think was the mindset back then when they were building these things and they were doing the connection with astrology?
Yeah, as above, so below, as they say, Jackal, and
right.
And the sky ground correlations, if you want to talk about the pyramids, for example, which Robert Boval brought out, I had Robert on the show, and actually I was talking about some geopolitics of actually Egypt at present. It wasn't so much about his famous Orion theory, but basically the 3 bell stars of Orion are mimicked with the pyramids on the ground, and there's probably the greater correlation theory as well now, where they say there's more pyramids to the north and to the south that incorporate the whole of Orion's belt. And when you look at the Tikal pyramids, that they mimic the Pleiades as well, and there's Angkor Thom mimicking the Draco constellation that Graham Hancock will talk about. But you look at these sky ground correlations, these mimicking these monuments with these constellations. It's in one respect, as above, so below. These guys are mimicking constellations for a teaching function, but they're also encoding in esoteric information, and I see this more than anything in ancient Egypt, Jackal, where basically they just thought in different ways. If you want to simplify it, you got to understand, you can't put our linear left brain logical material based Western civilization viewpoint on ancient Egypt, because it was so radically different in so many different ways. You got to understand when you start teaching in hieroglyphics, Jackal, okay? This might seem a bit of a long-winded Bob Geldof answer, by the way, but this is based in fact, that these guys understood to teach in symbology, you learn more, you take in more. Okay, so left brain, linear logic, digital computer. Right brain, analog computer, simultaneous thought, complexity. It's just one's male, one's female, if you want to call it that. But most people on the planet can synchronize the hemispheres of their brain. So it's not that you have a male brain or a female brain, but that's what they call them. The male brain is usually associated with the left and the female with the right. But these guys were all about synchronizing the hemispheres of their brain. And how they did that was this is why these guys had a consciousness technology. They were just so much more evolved in consciousness and spirituality and death. And they didn't have a word for death. They had a word for westing, which is when the sun set and rose and set in the west. That was what they call it, westing. Like. So the key thing is, though, by teaching in symbology, by teaching in hieroglyphics, you're using an image like for an acronym to teach. They actually think now that the hieroglyphs there was a multitude of level of meanings behind them. There was an abrupt meaning like a sentence or whatever describing something specific, but the use of the animal characteristics or the symbolic thought also had like an acronym type name, like we have modern acronyms today. But I mean, the key thing is, though, by teaching in terms of images and visual, you're appealing to that right brain. And when you appeal to the right brain, you appeal to simultaneous thought. And the same thing in coding these constellations into the monuments, so aligning them, you're bringing the sky to ground. Your teaching platform is the world that you're living in. It's everything, you're living the information, you're living the teaching platform. It's not just somebody trying to tell you. I'm surprised we have, advanced people in certain areas these days, because the level of education we have to get through in a left brain world, it's so difficult. I mean, look at PhD physicists or astronomers. They're talking gobbledygook, to most people. They're in their own world, and quite rightly so, because to get there, they've had to go through how many years of primary school, secondary school.
Right.
Then they again go to university and they build up their mathematical knowledge, they build up their physics knowledge, and then they get to a specialized branch. And by the time they get to the end, they're the only ones that can understand them, Yeah. And this is the problem. It's a linear education system that we know and understand today, and we find it so hard to look back on what these guys were doing, because we're looking back with a linear perspective, a linear logic, a linear education system. Whereas these guys in ancient Egypt is the prime example. These guys thought left brain, right brain. Now here's the thing: the corpus callosum that joins the left and the right brain. I forget the actual name, the lateral function, the lateral cortical function, that when people have this corpus callosum severed or it's non-existent, we have problems or disabilities. And if you look at Kim Peek, the real Rain Man, the guy, real Rain Man, he had no corpus callosum at all. Now he was locked in a left brain world, fully 100%. Now he had extreme abilities that we'll probably never see again on this planet. Awesome and awe-inspiring that we know the limits of the human brain because of Kim Peek. But Kim Peek was able to read a book in 8 minutes, Jackal, okay? And not only could he read a book in 8 minutes, he could read it with his left eye on the left page inwards and his right page on the right, with his right eye inwards. And
no kidding.
That's how he read a book. Most people don't know that. And the thing is, he didn't care. His brain was a supercomputer. He just took information and you know what? He remembered 98% of it.
Oh, I believe and it's funny you say that, the brain being a supercomputer. I think all our brains are a supercomputer. We are just being dumbed down through a lot of stuff that happens within the conditioning within media, stuff that they put in our foods, for example, that make us as a society dumber. I think there's a lot of that going on, and I think that we're being repressed from what we could actually be as human beings because of the fact that our brains are actually, it really is a supercomputer. There's so much knowledge there that we just can't tap into because of the stuff that they're doing to us. Basically.
Yeah, and the thing is, Jackal, as well, and to give the counter argument that everything in ancient Egypt was about dumbing you up or de-dumbing you up.
Right, yeah. Right.
And the thing is, I mean, these guys knew that when you teach in symbology, what happens basically is the left brain comes down, okay, it matches with the right, and then they both come back up together. So the sum of the parts is better than the actual individual sums of the two put together. It's like by synchronizing the hemispheres of the brain, both come back up to the same level again. Now that's extremely hard to do. You won't do this in a wet weekend, and you won't do it reading some books on ancient Egypt and consciousness and corpus callosum. I mean, you have to train your brain to do it. There's ways to do it. Yoga actually can help you synchronize the hemispheres of your brain. And when you, we only know about this corpus callosum and the lateral cortical function, this left brain and right brain hemispheres, relatively recently because of studies done with brain scans and CAT scans. And I mean, I was going to go and do a PhD in medical physics. I never did.
No kidding.
Yeah, this is what I was going to do. I was going to build MRI scanning machines.
Oh wow!
And CAT scans. I had a place offered in the Causta, King Abdullah of University of Science Technology in Saudi Arabia. I was going to go. I had a PhD program offered to me, and I never went in the end. I got, at that time in my life, I had just spent 10 years at university at night school, and I mean, I did 2 degrees, 2 masters, Jackal, and I went, that's enough. I can't take it anymore. I just want to go and use some of it, or you know, I wanted out of the engineering game, and I didn't know what I wanted, so I did a master's in research science and society. I did a physics with astronomy degree. They're academic degrees I did at night school. I never used them. You know, I ended up becoming an author for some various and strange reasons, but I mean, I'm glad I did, because I would have been back over there, you know, just, it would have been great. Like, you know, don't get me wrong. I wanted to go and do the medical physics because I loved the brain and neurology. And, you know, I understand that now when you look at the works of Schwaller de Lubis, like, and he has researched ancient Egypt, and he was a genius of his day as well. And he's the one that cracked this esoteric knowledge of hemispheres of the brain. And now the thing is, this corpus callosum, when it's not there, like I explained, you have the Rain Man type intelligence, like. But the problem is the right brain's not there either. So he wasn't able to dress himself, or you know, he had like major disabilities, like. But you know, his memory retention, nobody will ever touch that. I mean, we couldn't even design a computer that would be able to do that. I mean, at will, like that. You know, I mean, you can remember any postcode of any place and anywhere. Like, you know, he could remember everything in ancient history, from like queens and kings of England to the dates they were born, what day of the week it was. I mean,
wow.
You know, I recommend people to watch the Kim Peek, The Real Rain Man on YouTube. It's a wonderful documentary. And the key thing is, though, you know, we know a lot about because of him, because of that. Now, here's the thing: when you hypnotize somebody, Jackal, it's easier to hypnotize somebody, and this is where I'm going to tie it in now. It's easier to hypnotize somebody who has a bigger corpus callosum, this cord that links the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. It's easier to hypnotize them. And when you see hypnotists like Darren Brown, although he doesn't call himself a hypnotist on the air because of legal requirements, he calls himself programming, and it's all about magic and stuff, but it's basically... Yeah, well, there was a reason for that. There was a guy called Terence McKenna
McKenna, yep. We're aware of him.
Yeah, he got sued for £250,000 in a lawsuit in England, and because of that, so that's why they don't use the word hypnotism anymore. But anyway, when a hypnotist, you'll see showmen hypnotists, they ask a series of questions to the audience. When they were trying to wean out, they're trying to find out those 1 in 5 people that have the bigger corpus callosum. Because you can ask a series of questions, and the people that respond in a certain way or respond quicker are the ones that are more open to hypnotic suggestion. I mean, the reason they're open to hypnotic suggestion is because 1 in 5 people statistically have a bigger corpus callosum. Now,
that's interesting.
Yes, this is. I mean, my dad's a hypnotist, by the way.
Jack. I didn't know that. No kidding.
Yeah, this is why I know this. Like, I mean, my dad's a mechanical engineer and a hypnotist and plays musical instruments by ear. He's left-handed. He can't read sheet music. He's a genius in many levels. Like, he's almost got an autistic savant trait himself, but he's not autistic. Like, but I mean, he can basically listen to a piece of music from start to finish. He can't read sheet music, by the way. Yeah, I have to say that he can't. He's only ever wrote his name in his entire life. Okay, that's it. He doesn't write, doesn't read. He doesn't write, he doesn't read. He retired at the age of 40 with his money made. He's just a genius. He's been an entrepreneur of 15 different businesses. He's incredibly shrewd acumen, but he's left brain and he's right brain. He's got a left hand, like, you know, and he has this trait where you can listen to a piece of music from start to finish and reproduce it on 7 or 8 different instruments, like from keyboards, accordions. He doesn't even, you know those buttons on the side of an accordion?
Yeah.
He doesn't even know what they are. He just knows how to formulate.
He just knows how to press them, when to press them.
Well, it's not even that. He formulates the scale in his head. He'll find the scale by hitting 2 or 3 notes on the keyboard. He'll look at the spacing and he'll understand the spacing. You know, it's just pure genius. You just can't teach it to people.
That is genius.
Yeah, and the thing is that, I mean, that's the right brain kicking in. It's the extreme left, the extreme left is a digital recorder. The digital information, like Kim Peek. And I say the extreme right brain, especially in a male. When you see a left-handed male, that means they're using the right side of their brain. I don't know if you know that. And if you use your right hand, it means you're a left brain person. It's the way
I use my right hand, so I'm a left
you're a left
side of my brain person. Yes.
Okay. If you're a left-handed person, it means you use your right brain. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know that. Now I do.
Well, so somebody who's left-handed basically means they use their right brain. And my dad, is that analog computer where he's able to formulate. He can do that. That's what's called the simultaneous thought effect. Whereas he takes in a scale and formulates the scale in his head because he's formulating it. He's taking the information in and simultaneously doing it all at once. He just does it a different way. To him, he's just doing it a different way. But the point is that this right brain and this left brain is all linked. If you know, people with the biggest corpus callosum are all open to hypnotic suggestion.
Right.
But the ancient Egyptians were all about synchronizing the hemispheres of the brain. And in doing so, they were opening themselves to more symbolic thought. And when they were opening themselves to more symbolic thought, they were raising the corpus callosum and they were basically making themselves evolve more consciously. I mean, these guys were just educating themselves to educate themselves to educate themselves. But here's the kicker. It's a dangerous thing as well, because look what happened with Nazi Germany. When he taught people with symbology, he gave them the swastika, the ideology, the symbology.
Right.
He started branding them. And they all were going into a trance, but they weren't all going in. I mean, 1 in 5 people were open to hypnotic suggestion. He basically hypnotized the nation. Now, yeah. But I mean, so the intent has to be good behind it. Is my point, Jackal? Well,
it's funny you say that, but every dictator who's ever taken over any country or has ever had his rule per se has always been a real good public speaker. And Hitler was known to be a very good public speaker. And yeah, he did have almost a hypnotic effect over the entire population.
He told the people want them to hear.
Yeah.
He appealed to their ego. He used symbology in the swastika and the Third Reich, and it was all in ideology and symbology. And the thing is, 1 in 5 people are susceptible to that. Now, that's not a bad thing. My point is, good intent behind it,
right.
bad intent behind it. It's not neither good or bad. I don't think you're just because you can be hypnotized that's a bad thing. That's quite wrong. I mean, I would love to have a bigger corpus callosum and not be a left brain. I'm a very left brain creature, by the way. I have extremely deep memory retention for facts and figures, and it can remember weird facts about the days of the week as well, and it's the thing is, it depends what part of your visual cortex you use as well and how you remember information. But I mean, if you are a left brainer or a right brainer, you should try and synchronize the hemispheres of the brain. There is yoga techniques to help you do that, where you breathe in one nostril and out through another, and you basically you're getting your brain to use the left side of your body and the right side of your body by going in one side out the other. There's techniques you can do, and that forces your brain to use the right and the left together, and therefore synchronize. So the key thing is, though, the ancient culture of ancient Egypt, you have to understand that. I mean, most people don't talk about this. The Egyptologists don't even address this in any way. But these guys were able to use this right brain. Now, they embraced the left brain, too. I mean, they when you see all the ancient statues of ancient Egypt, the dynastic period, you see the man and the woman sitting side by side, ruling together. She's actually probably more of a deity than he is, and she's got the arm around him or the arm around the waist. They're sitting side by side, ruling the empire together. As were the Celts, by the way. I mean, they had the woman was as revered as the male in the society. But then you have patriarchy kicking in. Matriarchy's on the way out. Patriarchy kicks in, and patriarchal is this male-dominated left-brain culture that really kicked in about 1400 BC, just to all cultures around the world. But the key thing is that matriarchy is not the opposite of patriarchy. Matriarchy is man and woman, right brain, left brain ruling together. Patriarchy is just this male left brain dominating. It's not it's bizarre, But I mean, this is what deep ancient culture in ancient Egypt really stems from. And when you understand that this ancient Egyptian philosophy of this, simultaneous thought, the artistic expression, the ideology, the symbology, there was a reason. It was all esoteric teaching. They were all encoding information within information. They designed their temples with the Fibonacci, and they had the flower of life, which encodes the Platonic solids. These guys were just many levels above in terms of geometric thought and expression and consciousness and, you know, philosophy and like they weren't advanced in material-based civilization like with metallurgy and other things, but they didn't need it. They didn't care. That was like material-based system. It was irrelevant to them. Like, you know, they just.
James, you got to wonder though, what sparked this interest in ancient people in this world? I mean, what sparked the interest to be this way? I mean, they had to be the first guy who said, you know what, I'm going to start doing this way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the big question of all, Jackal. Because when you go back to 3000 BC, the very start of the story is the most advanced. And it's like we devolve, like. We don't.
Yeah, 'cause, you know, it's funny because the reason I say that is because we didn't discover telescopes as like the 17th century around there, 16th, 17th century. So you would figure that a civilization that old would not have no interest whatsoever in astrology or space, but yet they were so completely overtaken by astrology, and they were so deeply overtaken about knowledge and building, like you said, their brain, which again we really are being dumbed down from where we were back then.
Well, actually, there's ancient crystal lenses going back to nearly every ancient culture, and I'm not so sure now. There's been no telescope found, or no tube or assembly found.
Right.
There are ancient crystal lenses going back, and this is some of the ancient technology that I like to research, and you can probably appreciate why, but being the engineer, scientist, systems analyst. But I mean, Babylonia has ancient crystal lenses. From the Nimrod lens would be one of the most famous examples. But equally in ancient Egypt, there was crystal lenses. Crystals, by the way, is you can only cut crystal with crystal or diamond. Like, it's extremely hard. The hardness index is 9 out of 10, I believe. Silicon dioxide on the Mohs scale. This scale, diamond being 10, and the smallest being 1, like. But I mean, anything between, I think corundum or steel is about 6, like, you know. And so I mean, these ancient crystal lenses shouldn't even exist, like, you know. We don't even know how they actually formed them. Some of them actually are convex and concave, and you know, that means they had to be toroidally ground. A toroid is the shape of a donut, by the way. So the tool was a toroid. In other words, a donut-shaped tool had to grind the lens, and therefore the donut-shaped tool had to be made out of crystal as well, at least. So therefore, how do you make the donut-shaped tool? Because then that makes it even more complex than the actual device that was made. So, you know, these guys had like ancient technology. They had different ways of doing things. When you imagine I set you the task of building a pyramid, or I set you the task of building a temple and using large stones, and you come in your left brain world, the only thing you're going to use is physics or linear logic, or maybe these guys had different techniques. Maybe they sat and thought about it for about a day and a half before they jumped up and tried to maneuver it with a lever, like, you know. It's like they maybe. I often tell people when they look at me and I do them tours, I do book tours here in Ireland for the book, and I mean, they ask me how they build dolmens and shift these big 150-ton, 100-ton capstones. I think I live beside one of the, in Donegal here, and the largest capstone in the northwest of the country is 70 tons, Jackal. Now, it's 70-ton capstone in the shape of a triangle. They all seem to be a triangular harp-shaped stone as well, sitting balanced on 3 pedestals. Now, the heaviest capstone of any dolmen in Europe is 150 tons, and it's in Carlow, about 50 miles south of Dublin. And it's, you know, 150 tons. I think they say there's other ones in France, I think, is 100 tons. Now, that's an incredibly massive stone to be getting up on top of 3 pedestals. But think about it. I mean, if you put the 3 pedestals in the ground, and stood them up. Now, some of these, by the way, there's a dolmen in England which is like 16 foot high, like, you know, so you couldn't even have lifted it above your heads, like, even if you were able to lift a 100-ton stone. But the point is, if you put these 3 pedestals, these 3 standing stones, which, by the way, the standing stone that the capstone's balanced on has to be equally in as much in the ground as it is above the ground. So if you have a 10 foot above the ground, you have to have 10 foot in the ground. So you get them all in place, and you fill sand and soil and cover them up till you just see the top of them. And then you drag up the hill, you drag this dolmen capstone up the hill and dig away the dirt, and it falls down and lands on top of the 3 pedestals, like. So, you know, ideology and thought processes, like, can be used to discover our methodology, basically, you know. And I just think that's the way these guys did things. They had a methodology behind everything they did, you know. And sure, they may have had technologies that were curiosities to them. Maybe they had crystal lenses that they could like look at some stars constellations. I'm open to that. I'm open to them even having the telescope. There's a book by Crystal Sun by Robert Temple, who obviously researched the Dogon as well. And the reason he wrote Crystal Sun was he was looking at ancient crystal technology because he wanted to see could he prove the existence of the telescope long before it was actually accepted.
Right.
By looking at crystal technology. But the Vikings had crystal lenses, and they reckon the Vikings robbed them off somebody because the Vikings didn't have the technology to make them. There's some in Iran as well. There's some... the biggest piece of glass as well, by the way, to ever exist was Al-Best al-Sharim in Israel. It was until the telescope built in American University lab in the 1960s, it was the biggest piece of glass ever made in the world. 8 tons, I think it was. It was like 8 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot thick. And how they even got the...
Wow.
In ancient
How did
time,
they make that?
well, they put it in a pit in the ground, but to get the temperature up to that, they baked it in a pit in the ground, and it was still in place, you see. And then... They didn't even know it. They only discovered this recently, and they bought a bulldozer in to clear away some rubble, and they hit this lump of 8-ton piece of glass. It was a purplish glass as well. Now, what were they going to do with an 8-ton? Why they made it that big? There's no reason why they made it that big.
Even with whatever crystal technology they might have had, though, how far could they have really seen in the sky to be able to be so interested in astrology?
Well, I must say that the crystal lenses that do exist all seem to be for eye correction, as in myopia or defects in the eye, for short-sightedness, long-sightedness, and stuff like that. But so they wouldn't have been very powerful. Emperor Nero in Rome was known to have a green crystal lens that he could look through that would refract light and correct his optical problem, of myopia. Now, obviously, it was a green crystal, so everything he looked through to see it was green, Well, that was the type of crystal that they had, but it was a natural material for them to grind. But I think the lenses would have been around the eye problems, around amplification 2, 3, whatever it is. But it's mind-boggling. But there's technologies there, there's these granite vases as well, Jackal. Granite vases that basically have a very, very narrow neck. They're diorite schists, and they have a very narrow neck, but they're hollowed out on the inside. So if it's all one piece of stone, how did they carve these out? And these are going back pre-dynastic times, at least 3000 BC. Some of the most sophisticated artifacts in ancient Egypt, and mind-boggling.
What do you make of the Baghdad battery, for example? What do you make of that? Definitely that seems like a legit invention from the Egyptians.
Oh, totally. Well, no, that's Babylonian. It's actually they misclassify it from Babylon as the Sassanid period, but the Sassanids were basically warmongers that had no technology, and they just really inherited it from an earlier period. But there's several of them that exist. There's not just one example. It sits in the British Museum now. The German guy William Koenig, he discovered this in the 1930s, and he basically realized that was a battery, realized for what it was. The thing is, the problem with that is, it's not that whether it exists or whether it is a battery, it's what did they use it for, and therefore we wrestle in our civilization going, oh, the Egyptians had the battery, or the Babylonians had the battery, and they say the Egyptians would have known about it and probably had it. They reckon the Egyptians and the Babylonians were linked, at least rudimentary, but I think the Baghdad battery, basically, it could have been a medical curiosity. When you look at the Greeks, they used to treat ailments by putting their feet into electric eels, because when you get electric shocks to your feet, it's like a numbing effect for pain.
Right. Yep.
So, there could have been some sort of a medical curiosity where they zapped people. Now, where's the wires for the batteries? That's what people say. Maybe there was some sort of a mystical experience that when you touched your tongue off the thing, you could have got you put an alkaline cell on your tongue, who knows? There could have been sort of a curiosity like that. But I'm open to them having wires. The wires have never been found, so therefore it wasn't It wasn't a sophisticated battery system, but it was a battery. It was a technology. They had a science, like they had a science. There's many artifacts. You look at the Antikythera mechanism from Greece as well, like, you know, the island of Antikythera, and it's like an ancient planetarium with like epicyclic gearing, 1400 years before we invented gearing for clocks. Like, you know, it's like one of the most incredibly sophisticated gear tooth mechanisms ever to exist, and it's like dated to 300 BC, like, you know, and it's astounding, like, you know, it's actually a modern planetarium that can actually predict the eclipse of the sun, and not only that, can actually predict whether it's going to be red or white, like, you know, whether or orange, red, orange, or white, like. Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, the Antikythera mechanism, like, I mean, I hope to actually, I have an engineering friend, we hope to do a replica of the Antikythera mechanism. Now, there's been many replicas made, but it's a bit stealthy at the moment. I can't say why I'm building a replica, but I mean, there's been many replicas made, but we have a little project. We're going to make a replica. But I mean, yeah, there's like a Dutch guy made one in California, and an English clockmaker made a replica of it as well. And there's variations in designs of the replicas. They actually had to bring like a massive, like, 3-ton X-ray machine to Greece because they wouldn't even let it out of the museum. So they brought the X-ray machine to Greece to X-ray the fragments that were left. And by X-raying it, they were able to do 3D X-ray photography and take it by layer, like CAT scan the whole thing, basically. They have reflectance photography. They were able to bring out detail in it as well. And they can see how many gear teeth are on each cog. There's something like 65 gear teeth, like, and all condensed into a tiny box, like. But one of the gear teeth, 2 gear teeth had 50, you see, and it was the 50-50 gear train. But they put one on a pin and slot mechanism to simulate by a 50-50. There was no reason for putting a 50-tooth gear with a 50-tooth gear. It didn't make sense. But when you put it on a pin and slot so that it can swivel, you basically can simulate the oval trajectory of the sun. And that's what happened. They were able to simulate the seasons of the year as well, like, you know, incredibly sophisticated epicyclic gearing, like, you know, it's like.
No, it's incredible.
You know, so ancient technology is not to be denied. I mean, we have no idea. We're only looking at a fragment of what was left. But
that's no joke right there. And that's exactly why I always say that it's funny how people are so quick to jump on the bandwagon. Oh, aliens must have helped us. You know, we actually are pretty genius when it comes to technology, and we have always been, I think. I mean, there's always been technology of some sort on this planet. I'm positive of it.
You know what? When I look at the megalithic civilization and the research that I've done, I mean, my sequel, I get into the acoustics as well, Jackal. It's a minefield of research in itself. I mean, these guys had an acoustics knowledge second to none. They knew how to... They had, if you draw a sound map of these megalithic chambers that I wrote about, basically, you know, you can see the acoustic map of, like, they knew how sound refracted. I mean, Gavrinis megalithic chamber, they had an acoustics technology there. You can see it. They wrote it down if you look up Gavrinis megalithic chamber, you'll see it looks like constructive and destructive interference of wave patterns. They were drawing basically acoustics waves. All these megalithic chambers all resonate at the male vocal range or female vocal range, like I've measured 1 or 2 in Ireland. But the hypogeum in Malta is a megalithic complex linked with the megalithic chambers, and they also even carved a little niche that when you speak into this niche, that the whole chamber resonates only at the male vocal range. And they reckon they were synchronizing the hemispheres of their brain doing this. All these megalithic chambers as well, when you're inside a megalithic chamber, you're basically inside a sound box. You're actually inside an experiment. And if you start sustaining a drum beat between 5 and 7 hertz, 5 to 7 times a second, which I've done quite recently, and it's on my YouTube channel, jamesswagger.com, James Swagger, DOTCOM, into YouTube, and you'll see some acoustic experiments I've been doing with some people. But basically, the chambers basically become the experiment, like, and you're in the experiment, and you will affect your brain waves. Like, if you beat a drum 5 to 7 times a second, that's 5 to 7 hertz, which is theta frequencies, and your brain will go into a trans-hypnotic effect. And you will synchronize the hemispheres of your brain. You're going to the alpha, beta, theta frequencies, like, you know, and these guys are exploring their consciousness, like, you know.
Right.
Now, Why would they would do that? I think these guys started life with rich fertility and rituals at these ancient monuments. I think they explored their consciousness at these monuments, and I think when they died, the astronomer priests, they got buried there. Like, astronomy was one type of science that they used. So was acoustics. So was consciousness. That was their science of the day. Consciousness. And everywhere you look around the planet, consciousness was explored. Astrology, astrology, astronomy was explored. And as was acoustics. The ancient Egyptians were masters of acoustics as well, as were the Mayan. They were masters of mathematics as well. Like, you know, there's no evidence of mathematics in the megalithic civilization, but I mean, when you look at the Egyptians, they had like a binary system, you know, where they basically everything was multiples of 2, and they were that it wasn't like ones and zeros to them. Basically, they were able to multiply large numbers by putting everything to the power of 2, and by putting everything to the power of 2 is basically binary logic. They might not have called it binary logic, and they might not have wrote it down in ones and zeros, but the ideology that they were using was a binary logic ideology. It's the same as the ancient Chinese. They had a binary system as well. Did each one rediscover the process? Most likely, but I mean, it's very, very sophisticated ancient cultures, Jackal. Very sophisticated, like
it's amazing.
More than we give them, like, you know.
It's an amazing history that this planet has. James, it's been an honor having you on here, and I love the fact that you're on the network, like I said earlier, on PSN Radio. Give everybody the times of your show so they can listen in every week on Capricorn Radio.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here on the network, Jackal. The website is capricornradio.com, and I usually have just some archives there if people want to listen. But the times I'm on PSN Radio is 2 p.m. Eastern on a Tuesday, and let me get this right, 7 p.m. Eastern on a Friday. Hope I have that right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. 2 p.m.
7 p.m., yep.
Yeah, I'm calculating Eastern time here. But as I just discovered, you guys are on a different time to me tonight, because I nearly missed the show by an hour.
No, it's funny because you made it right on time, too, and you thought you were going to be late, but you're perfect. So, yeah, at 6 p.m. on Fridays and 2 p.m. on Tuesdays, please check out Capricorn Radio right here on PSN-Radio. James, real quick, I wanted to ask you before we let you go, is there another book in the works? I know you've already put out 2 books. Are you working on the 3rd book now, follow-up?
Yeah, it's not necessarily follow-up, but by the way, you can go to jamesswagger.com and you can check out my books there. I have a book page called Newgrange Cosmology, but it's linked up at jamesswagger.com. Everything I do is on jamesswagger.com. It's my biography page. But I have the Megalithic Acoustics book is coming out this month, and I have an idea for a book, but I might be doing a documentary with it.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's about consciousness and ancient Egypt and Schwaller de Lubis, and I'm a little bit. That's going to be a long-term project, so I might want to do some more research for that. You know, I like to do the research well and like to be very particular about what I want to do. But I have 3 guidebooks that I'm rolling out by the end of the year, because I've gone to all these megalithic sites in Ireland, and basically, the 3 guidebooks are just a wealth of information that I happen to have anyway, so I put them into 3 guidebooks. So that's kind of not an illustrious, it's more laborious than anything, but and I like the mystery books, by the way, but it's a great service to do the books, because, I mean, they're not there. They don't even exist in the record, and people are always asking me, and so I might as well put it in a book and put it for a relatively recently decent price on So yeah, I'm going to roll out those 3 guidebooks by the end of the year. That's really this year wrapped up for me. But I'm working on this project next year, and I want to turn my eyes to ancient Egypt. And I'm not done on the megaliths by any means. I have another bit of dolmen research. I've been asked to go to Asia, to Korea, to talk about dolmens and research the dolmens over there, because there's dolmens all over this planet, even in America.
Oh wow.
Yeah, upstate in New York, there's one dolmen, but apparently they were glacially deposited on top of 3 upright stones accidentally, all in the one region, apparently, in America. Like, so, that's their way of explaining it away. Like, but I mean, there's dolmens all over this planet. Like, India, Russia, Indonesia, Korea, Ireland, England, France, all around Western Europe, just littered everywhere. Some of North Africa as well, and so these dolmens are popping up everywhere. So I'm going to turn my eyes to that, like, and see what I can come up with as well. So I've got a lot of things in the pipeline. It's just I'm getting pulled in which direction, which one to do first, Jackal. But it's been a pleasure being here. It really has, like, and
you're the most busiest man on radio, without a doubt.
I wish I wasn't. I actually help other people set up radios as well and do some stuff. And it's like, I'm going to do that right now to my good friend Catherine Buckaloo at Truth Connections, and if I can help people do stuff with radio, I think it's a system. The whole of internet radio is a system of knowledge, like, and how to use shows and audio, editing your shows. And I like to help people. If I can give out knowledge, I will, like, But
I feel the same way, my friend. And again, it's been just a great pleasure having you on here on Inside the Jackal's Head, James. A pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing your show on Tuesday.
Thank you, Jackal. It's been a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, my friend. Everybody, take care. Good night, and we'll see you soon.